It didn't end with a goodbye. There was no dramatic argument, no slammed door, no last message that made my hands shake. It ended the way some things end when love gets tired. Softly, slowly, so gently that for a while I thought it was just life. I thought it was stress. I thought it was routine. I thought it was a season. But one night, I turned toward him in bed, just to feel him there, and my hand landed on cold space. He was still in the room, still breathing, still technically mine, but the closeness was gone. And in that moment, I realized something that scared me more than any breakup ever could. We weren't fighting, we were fading. You don't notice fading at first because fading looks like normal. Fading looks like he replies later than usual and you tell yourself not to be dramatic. He forgets a detail you shared and you laugh it off. He stops asking questions and you fill the silence with extra effort. He looks tired and you decide to be easier, so you become softer, quieter, smaller. Not because he asked you to, because your heart thinks shrinking might save love. I remember the first time I felt the quiet change. We were sitting together, side by side, sharing the same couch the way we always did. Same place, same evening, same routine. A show played in the background, but I wasn't watching. I was watching him, not in a suspicious way, in a loving way. The way you watch someone when you know their face better than your own reflections. He was scrolling his phone, thumb moving, eyes locked, and I said something simple, something innocent. I was thinking, we should take a weekend trip soon, just us. Nothing heavy, nothing demanding, just a small dream tossed into the air like a paper plane. He didn't look up. He said. Just that, a sound that could mean anything, a sound that didn't promise anything, and my heart waited for more. That's what hearts do when they're used to warmth. They wait. So I smiled and added, it'd be nice, somewhere quiet. He nodded again, still not looking. Yeah, sure. Not yes, not I'd love that, not tell me where, just sure, like I had suggested buying paper towels. I laughed lightly to cover the sting. Okay, I said, pretending it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered because I felt myself making a note inside my chest. He didn't meet me. And when that happens once, you can rationalize it. But when it happens often, you start adjusting your expectations. And that's the moment the quiet begins winning. Over the next few weeks, the quiet grew bolder. It wasn't obvious. It was consistent. He started responding to my emotions like they were weather, something happening in the background. I would share a thought and he'd say, "Oh," the way you say "oh" when someone tells you the bus is late. Sometimes he would smile, but it wouldn't reach his eyes. Sometimes he would hug me, but it felt like a gesture he remembered to do, not something he couldn't help doing. There's a difference between affection and obligation, and once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. One night I tried to bring it up, gently, not accusing, just honest. "Do you feel different lately?" I asked him. He sighed like the question had weight. "What do you mean?" he said, already defensive. I hated that. I hated that I had to be careful with my truth. I hated that I had to package my pain in soft paper so it wouldn't offend him. I chose my words like they were fragile. "I don't know," I said. "It feels like we don't talk like we used to. Like you're here, but not really here." He rubbed his face, looked at the ceiling. "I'm just tired," he said. That's what he always said. Tired. Busy. A lot going on. Always something that sounded reasonable. And the most dangerous thing about reasonable excuses is that they keep you from trusting your own feelings. So I nodded. "Okay," I whispered, swallowing the rest, and he reached for his phone again. That was the first time I realized my honesty didn't invite him closer. It made him leave the moment emotionally. The quiet wasn't just in the words. It was in the way he stopped noticing me. I changed my hair once, not dramatically, just a new style, something I hoped he'd smile at, something that felt like a small renewal. I walked into the room and waited. He glanced up. "Looks fine," he said. Fine. Not beautiful, not wow, just fine. And I stood there feeling foolish for expecting something so small. It's strange how love can make you feel guilty for wanting to be admired by the person you're sharing your life with. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror and tried to convince myself that I wasn't doing it for him. But I knew I was. We all do it sometimes. We want to be seen. And when we're not seen, we start wondering if we still exist. I didn't tell anyone about the quiet. Because how do you explain a heartbreak that hasn't officially happened? How do you tell someone, he didn't leave, but I feel alone. People understand betrayal, they understand yelling, they understand cheating even. But quiet looks like nothing. And that's what makes it so lonely, because you can't point to it, you can only feel it. And when you feel it long enough, you start doubting yourself. You start thinking maybe you're asking for too much. Maybe this is what adulthood looks like. Maybe romance is supposed to die and be replaced by routine. But here's what I learned. Routine isn't the enemy. Neglect is. And neglect doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like a man you love, sitting right beside you and never once turning his attention fully toward you. One evening, I decided to test something, not out of manipulation, out of quiet desperation. I stopped initiating. I stopped being the one who asked questions first, stopped being the one who suggested plans, stopped being the one who bridged every silence, and something terrifying happened. Nothing happened. Days passed, and the relationship didn't lean toward me. It didn't reach. It didn't miss me. It just continued. Like I was an extra piece of furniture. Useful, present, replaceable. I started noticing how my body reacted when he walked into a room. I used to feel warmth rise up in me. Now my stomach tightened. Not because I feared him, because I feared the disappointment of being invisible again. That's what quiet heartbreak does. It trains you to anticipate absence. And then you start living in that anticipation, like it's normal. One night, he came home later than usual. I didn't text him. I didn't call. I waited. Not because I was trying to punish him, because I was tired of being the only one who worried. When he finally walked in, he barely glanced at me. "Hey," he said, casual, not apologetic, not affectionate, just there. I paused and asked, "Everything okay?" He shrugged. "Yeah, why?" I swallowed. Because I wanted to say, "Because you don't feel like mine anymore. Because I miss you while you're still here. Because I'm starting to feel like I'm living next to a stranger who knows my name." Instead, I said, and I hated myself for it. That was the quiet winning again. Later, in bed, he turned away like he always did now. No goodnight kiss unless I asked. No hand reaching for mine. No closeness unless I created it. I lay there staring at the ceiling and I realized the hardest part of quiet heartbreak is that you keep waiting for a moment that justifies leaving. A moment big enough to point to. A moment you can explain. But quiet heartbreak doesn't give you that. It just gives you a slow erosion of self-worth. And one night, you wake up and realize you've been living inside a question. When did loving him start feeling like loneliness? That's where my story truly begins. Because the moment you admit that question, you can't go back to pretending. The next morning, I made breakfast. Not because he deserved it, because I needed something normal to hold on to. I moved around the kitchen quietly, listening for him to wake up, trying to convince myself this could still be saved by softness. The smell of coffee filled the air, a warm, familiar comfort. He walked in, hair messy, eyes half open, phone already in his hand like a shield. He poured coffee, didn't look at the food, didn't look at me. I waited, that old reflex. The part of me that still believed love was just a little lost, not gone. "I made breakfast," I said. He glanced over quickly. "Oh," he said. Then he ate, standing, scrolling, like the meal was fuel, not care. And something inside me finally got tired. Not angry. Tired. Tired in the way you get when you've been carrying something heavy for too long and you finally set it down. Not because you hate it, but because your arms cannot keep pretending. I said, "Do you realize you barely look at me anymore?" He froze. Not because he felt guilty, because he felt interrupted. "What?" he said, annoyed. I took a breath. "Sometimes I feel like you're here physically, but I'm alone." He scoffed softly, like the thought was dramatic. "You're overthinking?" He said. That sentence, it's such a quiet weapon, because it doesn't just deny your feelings, it makes you question your right to have them. I swallowed hard and tried again. "I'm not trying to fight, I miss you." He stared at me for a moment, then looked away. "I'm right here," he said, like that should be enough. But right here isn't love. Right here is proximity. And proximity without presence is just distance with a shared address. That day, I went out alone, walked until my legs ached. I watched couples holding hands, not as a performance, but naturally. I watched people laugh without guarding themselves. And the grief that rose in me wasn't jealousy, it was recognition. I knew what love was supposed to feel like because I had felt it with him once. That's what made this so painful. He wasn't always like this. He used to ask questions. He used to listen. He used to look at me like he liked being near me. And then slowly, subtly, he stopped. It wasn't one switch. It was 1,000 choices. And that's when the truth finally settled in my chest. Maybe he didn't stop loving me overnight. Maybe he just stopped choosing me every day. When I got home, he was where I expected him. Couch, phone, half present. He looked up. "You've been out," he said. "Not how was your day? Not did you eat? Just an observation." I nodded. He went back to his screen, and I realized something else. I had been trying to restore love with effort, but love doesn't return because you do more. Love returns when both people care enough to meet. And he wasn't meeting me. That night, I didn't reach for him. I didn't create intimacy out of thin air. I didn't say goodnight first. I let the quiet be honest. He noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked, irritated. I stared at the darkness and said softly, "I'm tired of feeling invisible." He exhaled sharply. "You always make things heavy." And there it was, the truth he had been living by. My needs were heavy, my emotions were too much, my longing was inconvenient, and something inside me finally stopped begging. Because I realized, when someone truly loves you, your heart doesn't feel like a burden to them. It feels like a responsibility they want to carry with care. I turned toward him. My voice was calm. "I don't want to live like roommates," I said. Silence. He didn't answer at first, and in that silence, I understood his answer. He didn't want to talk about it. Because talking about it would require effort, and effort was exactly what he had been avoiding. So I made a decision. Not loud, not final, but real. I began to detach, gently, quietly, the way love had detached from me. I stopped checking my phone for him, stopped rushing home to be near him, stopped twisting myself into someone easy. And the more I returned to myself, the more I realized how much of me I had given away trying to keep him. I started sleeping earlier, taking longer showers, listening to music that made me feel like a person again. And strangely, I began to feel safer. Not because the relationship improved, because my heart stopped living on his mood. One evening he tried to touch me, not tenderly, more like a reminder, a claim. I flinched before I could stop myself. He frowned. "What's your problem?" My chest tightened. "My problem," I said, "is that you want access to me without being close to me." He stared at me, as if he had never considered that intimacy was more than physical. As if he thought love was something you could keep without maintaining. He didn't argue. He just looked away. And that was it. Because if my pain couldn't move him, nothing would. That night, I cried alone in the bathroom. Not because I was weak, because I was finally grieving something I had been pretending still existed. I was grieving the version of him who used to choose me. The version of us that felt like home. The version of me who didn't doubt her worth. And grief is holy in a way. It's the proof that what you felt was real, even if it didn't last. I didn't leave the next day. People think leaving is immediate once you know, but love doesn't let go cleanly. It lets go in pieces. It lets go the way you loosen your grip when your hands are cramped. Slowly. Because part of you still remembers the warmth. The next week, I spoke less, not to punish him, because there was nothing left to explain. He didn't notice me pulling back until the house started feeling different. Not sad. Different. Less managed. Less softened. He looked at me one night and said, "You've changed." I nodded. Yes. He waited for me to reassure him. I didn't. "What's going on?" he asked. I looked at him with a calm that surprised even me. "I think I've been lonely for a long time," I said, "and I've been calling it love to survive it." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." And I almost laughed because that was the point. Fairness was never the standard. Convenience was. He wanted me present, but not requiring. He wanted love that didn't ask him to show up. But love isn't real if it doesn't cost you attention. "I'm not blaming you," I said gently. "I'm just telling the truth." The truth sat between us like quiet ocean. He didn't cross it. He didn't apologize. He didn't reach. And in that absence of reaching, I finally accepted what I had been resisting. He wasn't going to come back. Not the way I needed. Not the way I deserved. So my goodbye began, not with a suitcase, with a sentence I told myself every day. I can't keep starving and calling it a meal. I began to imagine a life without quiet pain. A life where my needs didn't feel like a crime. A life where I didn't have to audition for attention. And once you imagine that, Once you really imagine it, staying becomes harder than leaving, because now you know what you're missing. The night I left, it was quiet. Of course it was. Quiet had always been the theme. I packed a small bag. He watched from the doorway. "What are you doing?" he asked. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted peace. "I'm going to stay somewhere else for a while," I said. He frowned. "So you're just leaving?" I breathed in, and then I gave him the kindest truth I had. "No," I said softly. "You left a long time ago. I'm just finally catching up." His face shifted, anger, shock, confusion, but still. No reaching. No, please don't. No, let's fix it. Just the quiet, and that made it easier, because it confirmed what my heart already knew. If I stayed, I would keep disappearing. If I left, I could return to myself. I walked out into the night. The air felt cool, like a hand on my forehead. I expected my chest to collapse, but instead it opened. Painful, but open. And the days that followed were not easy. They were full of small ghosts. His name in my contacts. The empty space beside me. The reflex to tell him something. And then remembering, he's not my home. Not anymore. But something else happened too. I began to breathe like I wasn't waiting for permission. I began to laugh without checking if it annoyed someone. I began to sleep without rehearsing conversations in my head. I started to remember her. The version of me before quiet heartbreak trained me to shrink. And the strangest part? I didn't feel like I was losing love. I felt like I was leaving a room where I hadn't been seen. And I realized, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop begging someone to look at you. Because real love doesn't have to be convinced. Real love doesn't go quiet for months and call it normal. Real love notices. Real love asks. Real love chooses you, even on ordinary days. If you're listening to this in the dark, if you've been lying next to someone who feels far away, if your heart has been whispering something is wrong and you've been answering it's fine, let me say it gently. You're not crazy. You're not asking for too much. You're just starving. And you deserve a love that feeds you, a love that speaks, a love that turns toward you, a love that doesn't make you feel alone while you're still holding on. And if no one has told you lately, it's okay to let go of quiet pain. It's okay to choose yourself, even softly, especially softly, because sometimes the loudest courage is the quiet decision to stop disappearing.